is a Star Wars Action News Hypercast. This is Brock, Star Wars Action News Book Club Liaison, with a spoiler-free as possible review of Star Wars Kenobi by John Jackson Miller. Review copy courtesy of Del Rey Books. Obi-Wan Kenobi is settling into his new home near the Junlin Wastes on Tatooine, as he starts his mission to look after the baby Luke Skywalker on the Lars Moisture farm. He wishes to stay anonymous as possible, even if a new face to a rural small-town community naturally breeds curiosity. He adapts the name Ben and tries only to deal with locals in the nearby town when absolutely necessary. By circumstances out of his control, Ben happens to befriend the town's general store owner, Annalene, and he hesitantly agrees to come to her shop for his much-needed supplies instead of going to the more populated and distant town over. But trouble seems to find Ben even when he wants so much to avoid it. The Tuskens in the area have been raiding on local farmers' homesteads, and most of them have banded behind a man named Oren Galt, who has set up the Settlers' Call in defense of the Tusken Raids, headquartered in Annalene's store. And the Tusken leader notices that Ben has powers that the other settlers don't seem to have. Will Ben be able to stay out of the fray? Can he turn away from his ingrained Jedi ways and not help those in need? Will the local townspeople ever rid themselves from the omnipresent Tusken threat? Do the Tusken Raiders have a reason for the more frequent and targeted attacks? The story unfolds in Star Wars Kenobi. In press materials and in the acknowledgement at the beginning of this book, they have been very open about this story's origin being Star Wars as a Western, and that is a wise choice, as without that knowledge going in, I could see quite a few readers being disappointed with the deliberate pace of the piece. I saw shades of the classic Westerns Shane and The Searchers throughout the first two parts of this novel, but as we get deeper it moves into a more of a traditional Western tale territory, with indigenous folk versus the town people, local justice and local corruption, and the stagnant life in the frontier. As many of you know who listen to these reviews, I am a fan of Star Wars books taking on other genres. We have in the recent past had their take on the noir detective story, zombie horror, etc., and with mixed results. The major complaint usually is that while they are doing the genre, they hedge their bets and don't go all in. They lighten up on the sex or the gore because, hey, this is Star Wars. And here, with Star Wars as a Western, this genre story has a lot of the elements correct, but again, it seems to hedge its bets and just doesn't go all the way. For example, the Tusken Raiders seem to be in a place of where the Native Americans would be in the Star Wars Western. And it's mentioned numerous times that, like Native Americans, the Tusken Raiders kidnap to replenish their depleting numbers. Yet, we never see that. Many times they get quite close, and it feels like they're setting us up for a big kidnapping, and it never comes. And at the end of the book, you see why, as the plot point would have seriously taken the book into a darker place than it was already going, and it could derail what was already being set up, which would deny us with the quite satisfying ending the novel actually does provide. If you're familiar with John Jackson Miller's other work, his writing for comics, The Lost Tribe of the Sith short stories, or even his first novel, Star Wars Knight Errant, you know he can do short stories well. He also has a penchant for relatable characters, and all of that is on full display here. Here in Kenobi, he plays to his strengths by dividing the book into 4 parts, and being so open about the origins of the outline for the story, tell us that these 4 parts very well could have been 4 issues of a comic at one point. But for the most part, he's able to mask that likelihood. And I say for the most part because at the start of the 3rd section, the change of atmosphere is so jarring, you get thrown. And I started to wonder, how is it really related to the book I was already invested in? But thankfully, the tangent to Mos Eisley provides the book with the needed turns to end strongly for the characters' resolutions. This book reminded me of the Death Star novel from a few years back, that it was a lot about the day in the life of people who inhabit the Star Wars universe, and not about those who shape galactic events like we see in the movies. And like Death Star, Star Wars Kenobi is a character-driven, not plot-driven novel. The 3rd section I mentioned a moment ago has some much-needed plot development that propels the book towards the winning climax, a climax that smartly relies not on more plot, but in the great character work that has been established throughout the book. I enjoyed the way the book starts off with strong connections to the Star Wars movies. There is what reads like what would be an opening scrawl, like at the beginning of each Star Wars movie, explaining that Kenobi thinks he killed Anakin on Mustafar, as he doesn't know Anakin's in the suit yet. And the prologue starts right after Kenobi arrives on the planet for the first time, before he drops Luke off at the Lars homestead. So it starts during the events of Revenge of the Sith, And like in a couple of Star Wars movies, and of course many a Western, there's a saloon fight where Obi-Wan ends it definitively with a lightsaber. And this wonderful prologue closes out with Obi-Wan speaking to Qui-Gon in meditation with a profound thought. And I quote, "Years ago we removed one child from Tatooine thinking him to be the galaxy's greatest hope. Now I have returned one with the same goal in mind." Nice! Thankfully, the author put all of this at the top of the book to whet our appetite, because we don't see Obi-Wan again for another 50 pages. The background information in this first section is voluminous, but presented very, very well. The greatest compliment I can give this book and its author is that he so expertly and economically introduces this world. And I'm not talking about Tatooine, though he smartly incorporates practically everything we know about Tatooine into the book. From the two suns, the oppressive heat, Tusken Raiders, moisture farms, land speeders, Sarlaccs, Jabba the Hutt, pod racing, Mos Eisley, Mos Espa, the Jawas and their sandcrawler. No, the burden here is not necessarily creating a world in a time we are unfamiliar with. We know this setting, but in setting the scene so that we care about what is going on with characters in situations that we don't know anything about. And I instantly felt connected to these townspeople. It felt like I knew people like Annalene and Oren, either from real life or from countless amounts of movies that I've seen. Part of the connection comes from the witty dialogue, others from the sympathy created for these characters as we learn what they have lost living here on this barren, dangerous planet. As a result, by the end of those first 50 or so Ben Kenobi-less pages, the reader is ready to follow these new characters Mr. Miller has created with a concrete hold of the whole situation, who everyone is to each other, which relationships and characters are important, their living environment, and so on. So then he is able to reintroduce Kenobi into this world, and we are then able to empathize with all sides. And none so expertly than with the Tusken Raiders. We have many a chapter throughout the book with the Tusken clan and their leader Ayark, which I found excitingly refreshing. So easily could Mr. Miller make them the two-dimensional villainous Indians to the frontiersmen of the Tatooine settlers, but no! He takes the time to thoroughly flesh out their cultures, their beliefs, needs, desires, and it makes for effective storytelling, all the while tying in some popular comic book stories revolving around the Tuskens. Miller does a great job of humanizing Ayark, and Ayark's arc becomes one of my favorites in this novel. So while the book is about Obi-Wan's first coming to Tatooine and his efforts to settle into his new life as Ben, it is very much about the settlers Oren and Annalene and their lives, and you quickly realize that they are the two main characters of this book. Miller uses these characters to flesh out and run parallels to Ben's story, to give us a window into the frontier life existence, the harsh realities of living on a desert planet, of loss and the unforgiving realities of life here. The interactions between Annalene and Oren are so clearly two people who have dealt with each other for years and years, and we get why they make the choices they do, even if you disagree with them. There is a lived-in reality to them that I was able to latch on to right away that propelled me to care about what happens next, even when the book gets talky. The author especially nails these two characters as parents. Their reactions and dialogue towards their kids is so genuine that you can tell the man is a parent himself, which I believe was a comment I made in my review of Star Wars Knight Errant. I felt that the author really got the characterization of Obi-Wan, and never once did I question his actions as not being true to the character we know so well. Miller nails Obi-Wan's sly humor and manner, and with the help of the reaction and observations of other characters, convey the inner core of sadness this man is feeling at this point in his life. Miller hints about his character's feelings at first, and you're able to come to these conclusions by putting all the pieces together. Yet, eventually, there are scenes where he blatantly spells out all that subtle work. Perhaps that was intentional, targeted at specific readers, but I was following the subtlety quite well, and enjoying the nuances he was displaying in the prose with Ben's demeanor and edge to his dialogue. It has to be said, there is a definite Superman feeling to some key scenes in this novel, where Obi-Wan steps in and saves the day. And there is also a few Clark Kent using his powers covertly to assist the helpless scenes, like behind a makeshift smokescreen from a fire extinguisher, and no one's the wiser. Those scenes are quite entertaining to read. I laughed out loud when in one chapter we read about a disturbance inside a building, and directly afterwards, all of a sudden Kenobi shows up, all Clark Kent, saying he was sidetracked by a street vendor and he seems to have missed some excitement. Beyond all the fun to be had there, Mr. Miller is also smart to have some consequences for Ben Kenobi stepping up and using his Jedi abilities. For example, he has a Yark, the main Tusken Raider, noticing Kenobi use his abilities when no one else does. Mr. Miller is able to mine those minor miracles the stranger creates to great effect for character motivation, arcs, and parallels. There's also some great work here tying together established canon of Star Wars, especially in linking and transitioning Obi-Wan Kenobi from the prequels to the Ben Kenobi we meet in A New Hope. Some gaps are nicely filled in as questions that you may not have ever thought of before, like, why does Ben live so far away from Luke if he's supposed to be watching over him, and why didn't he change his last name if he is on Tatooine hiding from the Empire? And all this results in creating one long timeline between the prequels and the OT that feels like it works. And the author accomplishes a lot of that at the end of the many chapters by having Obi-Wan meditate to Qui-Gon Jinn of his struggles and challenges of his mission and his feelings on the given day. The meditations also allow us to see the real Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi that we know from the prequels, and not just the secretive Ben he projects towards the other characters. Star Wars Kenobi is a surprisingly refreshing read, a character study of 4 individuals and how their lives intertwine and feed off each other for better or for worse, with the always timely theme of letting go of your past, of your set ways, and embracing the now for your future. The book reads so well because we get these characters, we understand their points of view, and their hardships, even if we aren't living them ourselves. And while not chock full of what we all consider Star Wars action, there is more than enough Star Wars here for us fans. No one is more surprised than me with how much I enjoyed reading Star Wars Kenobi, and it is a happy recommend. For Star Wars Action News and the Star Wars Action News Book Club, this is Brock. Thanks for watching. Please check out some of our other videos, and you can hear hundreds of Star Wars collecting podcasts and see photo galleries at our site, swactionnews.com.